What's up, everybody? It's Izzy, and in this video I'm going to give you my opinion on crazy arch, really super short range of motion bench presses. But first, let's give props where props are due. This is two-time IPF world champion Eddie Berglund breaking his own world record in the raw bench press with a 189 kilo bench at a body weight of 66 kilos. That is 416 pounds at 145 pounds body weight. As I said, Eddie's a two-time Raw world champion in the junior 66 kilo division. So he is 22 years old, about 5'4", which is 162 to 163 centimeters tall. He has squatted 210, which is about 462 pounds, and deadlifted 220, which is about 485 pounds. So obviously, overall, a strong guy for a 66 kilo lifter, a 145-pound guy, a real young guy too. So a very accomplished lifter, tons of records, a world champion at the pinnacle of the sport, basically. So I think one of the things that jumps out to people, besides just the crazy weight, of course, is Eddie's crazy technique. He's got a maximally legal grip width, and he's also got a huge arch, and his range of motion is literally down to the point where it's just a couple of inches. Now, I want to talk about how this is either good for the sport or bad for the sport, in my opinion. So, number one is I think a lot of people argue that it's not safe, and I don't buy that at all. I mean, it is true that anytime you put the spine in a hyperextended position, there's a risk of injury. But in the bench press, the bench bears most of the load, not the spine. So this is very different than, say, flexing your spine or hyperextending your spine in a deadlift or a squat, where the spine actually has to bear most of the load. You're laying on a bench when you bench, so I don't really buy that. Now, from a marketing perspective and an aesthetic perspective, I don't think there's very many arguments to be made that this is bad for the general public's perception of the sport. When people see this, they think it's a joke and that it's ridiculous. And uneducated, ignorant people will even think that, Eddie probably can't even bench 2 plates with a flat back. And those of us who've been in the sport long enough know that's just completely false. Now, the counter argument there could, of course, be that it doesn't matter what the general public thinks because the sport is never going to be mainstream anyway, and the sport is for the competitors. And I am closer to that side of things, but it may surprise you to know that I'm not a fan of this style of bench press. And let's kind of talk about why. The original point of powerlifting was to see who is the strongest. Let's face it, that's really the goal of the sport. And when it comes to the bench press, what we're looking for is an overall test of upper body strength. And that's why the bench press was selected for the sport. It's an overall test of upper body strength. And what happens when you take a wide enough grip and you have a good enough arch is that you don't actually do a full range of motion bench press anymore. Now, some people, even with an arch and with a wide grip, will still have a full range of motion bench. And that doesn't really bother me as much. But what does bother me is when you get bench presses that are arched so much and with grips that are so wide that the humerus never breaks parallel with the floor. So another way of thinking about that is that, the elbows never reach 90 degrees or the elbows never drop below the level of the bench. The elbows never get below the shoulders. So in other words, you never get that, you never pass through the point of mechanical least advantage in the bench press where, you're below parallel, just like in the squat, and you have to break up above parallel. With an arch that is crazy enough, you actually turn the movement into a partial. And to me, this is kind of BS because some competitors are doing partials and some competitors are doing a full range of motion bench. And the reason why the bench was put into powerlifting was as a test of full upper body strength. And when you eliminate full range of motion, you're eliminating or at least greatly reducing the contribution of certain muscle groups. So it goes beyond just range of motion. And I think at this point, at least in my opinion, when you cross from not being a full range of motion movement anymore, that's when you cross the line from being more of an impressive feat of strength to being more about, mobility and morphology and really just kind of a trick. It's a bit of a party trick, circus trick. And I'm not saying it doesn't require immense strength, and I'm not saying that competitors shouldn't take advantage of their natural gifts in order to do as well as they can in the sport. Because let's face it, this is currently legal. However, in my opinion, the sport would be better off figuring out a way to legislate this type of benching out of the sport. And I'm not arguing that there should be no more wide grip benches or no more arching, but I do think there should be some rule that at least mandates full range of motion, just the same way that there is in the squat. The crease of the hip has to drop below the top of the patella, and there's no reason why you couldn't have a similar rule in powerlifting with regards to the elbow and the shoulder. You'd have to be more specific with the language to make the rule easier to judge, but it wouldn't be that hard to judge, and at least it wouldn't be any harder to judge than squat depth is to judge. And you would be getting, at least in my opinion, a more representative test of upper body strength, which is why that the bench press is in the sport in the first place. Anyways, guys, that's just my opinion. Let me know what your opinion is in the comments below. And as always, my friends, have a nice day and good luck with your training. Peace.